Hey everybody, welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani. We are live here on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, X, all the places. We are live on all the places. But the only disadvantage that we have going on right now is that our beautiful viewers here on TikTok will not be able to see the book that we are reading on screen. So, if you are interested in reading along with me today for our book club, I highly suggest you go to my YouTube channel, The Magical Solution, so that you can see the screen and read along with me. Otherwise, feel free to stay on TikTok, listen to me. We're still going to have a good time, okay? So, we are back. I haven't been on the book club for a couple of Tuesdays now. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. Summer solstice was amazing. Strawberry moon was amazing. We had the mentees come from all over to participate in their floral baptism. I had tons and tons of things I had to do and prepare for. It was just a lot. So definitely was not able to do the book club as frequently as I wanted to, but we are back and we are ready to roll. So let's get to it. Let's share screen real quick so that we can get started on this thing here. Share it. Right. But then we also have to do this. Beautiful. All right. All right, y'all. Give me a thumbs up in the comments if you can see the screen and if you can see the book on screen. All right. And for those of you on TikTok, what's up? How y'all doing? Thank you for joining me tonight to hang out. We do book club here at the Magical Solution every Tuesday night, or at least I try to, every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are moving forward with the book Harmonial Philosophy. It is a compilation, it is a compendium of all of Andrew Jackson Davis's works, and that includes his written works, his seminars, and any public speaking that he might have done that was recorded. It's all compiled in this book to explain, the start of the universe, the science of the spirits and the spheres, the mechanisms of the universe and of spirits, etc., etc. So we are moving forward today. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, do not feel intimidated. Do not feel like you have to know all the information from before in order to hang out with us tonight. By all means, every bit of what I put out here, I'm going to pull out spiritual nuggets and spiritual pieces of wisdom to give to you guys. So no matter what, you're going to walk away with something fulfilling. And I think that that's what's most important, right? So let's get to it. The title of today's chapter is entitled A Spiritual Consideration of Physical Man. All right. We have seen that outer forms correspond to interior conditions, and that which obtains throughout the cosmic world is true in a preeminent sense of man, meaning as above, so below. What is within is also without. That's what he's trying to say here. Let it be remembered also that wisdom is the grand faculty of the human soul and should govern all that is below, whether faculties or affections. All right. Wisdom is the Lord of creation. And not only is love itself directed thereby, but all its emotions are modified. Okay. Love has intercourse with the outer world through the medium of sensation and thus receives a continual influx from the elements of all material things. Thereby, also, love pours forth its springs of affection for external objects. So do the inner and outer communicate with one another. And over this intercourse, that which should reign is wisdom. Okay. So, what we're talking about here is this idea that, wisdom is the supreme thing, right? Divine consciousness, right? And through acts of love is how this wisdom, is how this divine consciousness interacts with the physical creation of matter. Whatever this divine consciousness has poured forth, it can now interact with it and have that relationship through acts of love. Okay. Now, the will is likewise under the same potential direction. Whenever the faculty of will is instigated by love to perform an external act, wisdom perceives the suggestion, divines its use, and directs the will to its accomplishment. Bitch, listen to that again, please. I'm gonna highlight it. I'm gonna highlight it for you guys. Let's listen to it again. Whenever the faculty of will is instigated by love to perform an external act, wisdom perceives the suggestion, divines its use, and directs the will to its accomplishment. Meaning, if you approach life in perfect love and in perfect trust of divine wisdom, then that divine wisdom will perceive your acts and will help you and assist you and direct you in accomplishing what you desire, because it is coming from a place of love and it is coming from a place of trust in divine source. Right? So right here we have something that what today's modern society would call manifestation practices or law of attraction practices. We have it here in the 1800s being spoken about on this type of level, right? Dope. So when the faculty of wisdom is undeveloped and love actuates alone, the manifestations of will are then impulsive and often injurious to the well being of man. Okay. So if you are someone who is 100% an emotional creature, and that emotion is not backed by logic, rationality, and a balance of intellect and wisdom, then your actions, although might be good intended and although might come from love, can still be harmful actions and still manifest from a place of impulsiveness, because it is manifesting from the emotions alone and not from the wisdom, which oftentimes will temper the emotions, will oftentimes cause will instill a little bit of pause into the conversation so that you can act right. Okay. Now, we discern in this manner the importance of, number one, the elevation of mind, number two, the instruction concerning its inward nature, and number three, its relation to the world, right? So, these three things are what we are trying to figure out with the wisdom and the love that we are gifted and have, right? Now, the cause of disunity in actions, the cause of disunity in actions, feelings, and affection is not innate depravity, but misdirection of the faculties. I really need everyone to hear this. I really need everyone to hear this. I like this sentence a lot because this really addresses a lot of the excuses I often hear. And these are excuses that I myself have utilized in my growth process. Being a neurodivergent person, being someone who was undiagnosed so long and did not get diagnosed until my late 30s, I lived an entire life of using my neurodivergence, not even knowing that that's what it was, using that as an excuse or a clutch or a reason to not do something, right? And part of that feeling was because I didn't think that I was imbued with those skills. when the reality was is that I was imbued with the skills. I just was misdirected on how to use it because I was being taught neurotypical ways of using those skills instead of neurodivergent ways, you know. There people were not creative with how they taught me things. And not only that, but I grew up in the 80s, and so, you know, neurodivergence, autism, all that did not exist. You know what I'm saying? Like, we didn't talk about shit like that. You know, your kid had ADHD at best. That's what they would say. Your kid is a little too much, and they need like to chill out, like that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So what this is really doing is that it's really validating a lot of people. And I want you to hear this. If you are someone who suffers from neurodivergence of any kind, or just simply someone who suffers from poor self esteem, poor self image, poor self talk, please understand that all of your actions and feelings and affections are truly imbued with wisdom and love by God. But they have been misdirected. Your faculties have not been developed correctly. And this may be why you might feel a disconnect or a disunity, or feeling a little bit outcasted with regards to your skill sets, with regards to your abilities and to your faculties. Okay, but I need you to know that it is in there, and it is only you it's only about you working through that, or finding the right teacher who can help you work through that. Okay. Now, the base passions of the soul and every species of licentiousness are referable to the ignorance and imbecility of minds unguided by wisdom and apart from spiritual unfoldment. So, we're not talking about the average person here. We're talking about people whose soul, people whose spirit is not elevated yet. And so they function from a very base perspective, and that base perspective is rooted in survival. It's rooted in predator prey type of mentality. It's rooted in competition. It's rooted in consuming and taking and things like that. It's rooted in a lot of ignorance, and it's rooted in this idea that that their wisdom and their spiritual unfoldment is somewhat a separate process from their day-to-day life. And the reality is that it's not. And that's where the disconnect comes in. The disconnect comes in when you start thinking that your spiritual journey is separate from your physical life. Although there is some truth to that, meaning that, you know, if you are hungry, if you are at risk of losing the roof over your head, if you cannot afford to keep the lights on or put gas in your car or put food on the table for your children, then yeah, you know, spiritual discussions and working on your spiritual development is kind of like the last thing on your list of things to do. Totally get that. Totally get that. But it's also this idea that once you accept that this journey that you are on, regardless of how insufferable it might feel, is still a spiritual journey, because it's not different, it's not apart from the physical. That's when you can start moving differently, right? Imbuing faith, imbuing confidence, and removing fear from situations is sometimes some really, really big steps for people, but can make all the difference. It really can, you know? Let us desist, therefore, from proclaiming metaphysical hypothesis derogatory to the innate divinity of the human soul. Let us rise to the plane of interior and natural thought, and let all external activities correspond to the unrestricted sanctions of wisdom. It is through lack of such government that men have adhered so long to the imaginative beliefs of their love part instead of the spontaneous teachings of judgment. Hereditary opinions of every kind are simply early impressions made upon the former faculty. But men who discard all hereditary affection for thought are those in whom is developed the highest faculty of the soul. And this is wisdom. So, here's where the argument kind of comes in. I kind of want to pause here for a second because this is where the argument comes in. So, because spiritism, and espiritismo is rooted in wisdom and is rooted in intellectual development as being part of the spiritual development, emotional development, etc., there is a bit of issue that comes about when we start to reach the espiritismo community, because when we look at spiritism and spiritualism and when it came over, we're looking at a very elite population, a population that really favored education, college education, spiritual education, all the things that the Jibaros and the country folk did not have access to. Right. So, this is where that divide started to happen, where we have sort of like this elite, sort of Protestant based spiritism and espiritismo that was meant for the light-skinned upper echelon people of the Caribbean, those who can afford to send their children to college, those who can afford to go to the best schools on the islands, etc., etc. And so there's a little bit of a rift and a little bit of distrust that we see within this espiritismo community regarding intellectualism. And that's why I made my video last week about this idea that intellectualism is a problem in the spiritual community, and I have a huge issue with that. We need to remove the elitism out of it, okay? Because the elitism is still there. It has only changed. The elitism now that we're dealing with is the elitism. I mean, it's let's be real. The elitism, the problem is the European perspective. Let's be real. But the elitism now is this idea that, unless you go to the psychic medium schools, to the evidential mediumship colleges, and to the spiritism certification courses that are held in France and in England by the paranormal societies and all that, unless you do that, you're not a real so and so. Right? So that's the elitism that we're facing now that needs to take several seats. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a problem. But at the same time, there is a certain amount of truth to the fact that we do have to progress. We do have to elevate emotionally and intellectually as well as spiritually. And so this resistance to intellectualism, to reading books, to seeing anyone as being an intellectual as someone who doesn't have the skills to do the thing, it also needs to be stopped. So, yeah, this is definitely a conversation within our community we need to have, we need to address, and we need to let go of so that everyone can move forward, because all this is doing is hindering us big time. You feel me? Thence they receive, and thereby impart instruction. And whatsoever is prompted within them by the love nature is made perfect in order and in form. Okay? So if you move in the truth that is wisdom, and you move in your love nature, life will just work out for you. I mean, which they're not wrong. They're not wrong, honestly. Okay. So now the physical senses of humanity have their correspondences on the inward side as well. That which we call feeling is the restricted sense of the term, and which is literally touch, has a close relation to the faculty of love. Okay? Hearing, or the sense of external sound, is correlated with the joint action of love and will. But with the latter, especially, For thereby this sense is rendered a delicate medium of communication between the inner and outer worlds. The power of seeing is related to the faculty of wisdom and hence is subject to the will. Seeing is always an act of will approved or permitted by wisdom, for a person may or may not employ his organ of vision to behold material things. It is otherwise with hearing, for will has no power to prevent the influx of sound vibration. Neither will nor love has control over the sense of touch, which is a connecting link between human faculties and the instincts of animal creation. The two other senses, namely taste and smell, are modes of the sense of touch and are subject neither to the judgment nor the will, unlike vision, which they have no power to resist external invasions. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know where he got this information from. This is very just kind of out there to me. It's very like, here are these associations, here's what they're connected to, and I say so because I say so. It's a little woo-woo for me, but let's kind of break it down a little bit so that we can try and understand. Okay. So the physical senses, which we perceive by sensory, like the physical senses, touch and smell and taste, all the five senses, right? All the feelings, right? Um, they are related, or they are correlated or governed by either will or love, um, and or wisdom. Okay. And so they're saying here that the faculty of love, right, in order to sense love in a physical way, we do that with the sense of touch. Okay. When we are using our sense of hearing, we are listening, hopefully, okay, um, to the combination or the joint action of love and willpower and will. Okay. When we are seeing, we are sensing wisdom through our sight. But that wisdom is still subject to the will, right? So will is much more about like that desire, that action, right? So regardless of what we're talking about, seeing, touching, or hearing, all of these three things are the main ways in which we physically encounter love, willpower, and wisdom. Okay. And that's really what he's talking about here. But he's also talking about the that willpower, no matter how much will you have, no matter how much intention, no matter how much action you do, nothing will prevent the influx of sound vibrations, right? So, what you hear, and this sentence, to be honest with you, makes a lot of sense according to science, because in science they've done experiments in terms of using the five senses and which is more accurate. And believe it or not, seeing is the least accurate of all of the senses. Using your sight is one of the least accurate things, because your sight also is a filter, and you have certain cones and rods, right? So you can only see a certain spectrum of color. You can only see, certain things. And so there's a lot of your vision field that is missing, right? So you're not seeing the entirety of everything. That's number one. And number two, seeing also is a receptive and a active sense, meaning that you may be seeing something but you are also projecting onto what you are seeing, right? So there is sort of like that trick that happens with the eyes, and that trick happens by your own internal dialogue, right? Whereas hearing has a little bit of the same problem as seeing, in that your hearing can only go so high and so low in either direction, but hearing will still, no matter what, pick up vibrations. Your hearing may not be able to interpret the sounds, right? Your brain may not have the capacity to interpret the vibrations into specific sounds, but hearing still can consume the vibration. And that, my friend, is why they say that no matter what, there's nothing that can stop those sound vibrations from occurring in your sense. And that is why hearing is such an important sensitive medium between the spirit world and the physical world. This is why many people who encounter spirit will oftentimes encounter them with their clairaudience first. Ooh, look at that. Look at that. Education. Neither will nor love has control over the sense of touch, which is a connecting link between human faculties and the instincts of animal creation. The two other senses, namely taste and smell, are modes of the sense of touch and are subject neither to judgment nor the will. Unlike vision, they have no power to resist external invasions. Okay? All right. The connection thus established between outward faculties and ruling qualities within shows that man's external form corresponds to and represents his interior being, or the form and structure of the soul. All right, let's be very careful. Let's be very careful with this sentence here, y'all. This is the sentence that tells people that really, this is the sentence that really takes ableism to the next level. Because we hear so many people in the new age community talking about, oh, people with disabilities or people who have intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities or physical disabilities, they are just spiritually undeveloped. They are a reflection of their interior spiritual undevelopment. Or the other one, which is they did something horrible in past lives and this is the body now that they are in, as you know, repercussion, if you will, for their actions, as karmic debt for their actions, right? This is such harmful rhetoric. Please let us remove this from our conversations. Stop it. Absolutely stop it. Right? So, yes, we do see that there are the physical senses that help us interpret our physical world, right? And then we have senses that are within us that mirror our physical senses that help us to interpret the inner world, right? Then we have the nervous system and all the various systems within our body that bridge those gaps for us, right? But just because someone has a disability within one or more of those physical senses does not mean that they are spiritually disabled. However, there is such a thing as spiritual disabilities. That's a whole nother conversation. We'll get into that at some other time. But this conversation needs to come to an end, or we need to find a better way of explaining this that doesn't demean or, demoralize people with disabilities, because that is truly fucked up. All right? So let's work on that, peeps. Let's do that. So, be it remembered that forms are created and determined only by their essence, a truth which applies to man and the whole universe. To behold the soul or spirit of man, observe therefore his material mode of being. Remember also that the real man is internal and only animates the material form. Okay. So this is where he catches himself. He realizes what he said here. I think he realized what he said here and he caught himself real quick, right? Because to say that in order to know the soul of man, all you got to do is look at them. And if they look all fucked up, that means that their soul is fucked up. Yeah, that's a problem. And so that's where he caught himself and is like, oh, but just remember that at the end of the day, we are souls first. And our interior makeup is really what matters, and our material body is only the thing that we animate. And so even if the material body is fucked up, like, we're still spiritual creatures. Like, it's all good, right? Um yeah, be careful with rhetoric like this, and just know that this rhetoric obviously has been going on since long before the 1800s. Let's not forget, right? We go back to ancient cultures. If you had a child with disabilities, they would throw that baby into the woods, or they would throw that baby over a cliff or whatever, because it was all about keeping the strong, right? And now, as we have evolved, now as we have become more compassionate people, now that we have become more connected to our spirit and our soul form, now that we move in love towards, and with wisdom, we now understand that disabilities and quote unquote these little imperfections that people would oftentimes, you know, discard, are not a problem, and need to be taken care of and nourished, and worked with just differently, right? They just have to be worked with differently. That's it. Now, and I'm saying this as someone who works in the mental health field for over 20 years. I have not only worked with people with disabilities, all right, but I've worked with people with severe disabilities, all right? I've been working in the mental health field since the times when they used to call these people retarded, when the word retard was a normal word to use in the medical field. I used to work back then, okay? And I came up and evolved with that culture. So when I tell you that these individuals, okay, are perfectly capable of doing all the same things that we can do, they just have to be approached differently. They just have to be taught differently. They might need different accommodations and different tools, but they are capable. I'm saying it with my whole ass chest. Okay? Okay. So let's do this. So, number 1. Well, first, let's read that sentence again. Remember also that the real man is internal and only animates the material form in order to protect perfect its constitution, to preserve its identity, and to establish inseparable connection between the material and physical world. So these are the 3 things and the 3 reasons why we need to always remember that we are a soul first inhabiting a body. All right? Now, all material things created by man are the forms of his thoughts, and these are offsprings of his soul. Were he differently insphered and differently taught, he would not be so far removed as now from the spiritual world. But he becomes individualized in this sphere and preserves his form henceforward. He exists in the other world in a perfect human form. For the second sphere is unfolded from the first and is the perfect form of this, its parent and creator. Okay. All right, so let's go back now and let's read the footnotes, because I always like to read the footnotes before I move on to the other chapters, just to kind of get a better understanding of what is being written here. Okay. So it says here in the footnotes that the fundamental idea of the harmonial, as indeed of Hermetic philosophy, is illustrated after another, and that follows as minds absorb vitality and substances generally from the atmosphere, which is generated and exhaled by all the spiritual spheres. Hence, there is a spiritual atmosphere within that which is material. The soul feeds upon the one and the body upon the other until, by a refining process, they blend together and the spirit thereby is made to increase in substance. Human souls will accumulate spiritual substance in strict harmony with their individual aspirations. Those who are on the quest of love will grow spiritually wealthy therein, and so of knowledge and wisdom. just in proportion as these departments of mind open to the celestial atmosphere within the common air, so will love, knowledge, and wisdom increase the substance of the soul. Okay, so this is a really great footnote. What he's talking about here is that, like, you know, yeah, we are a soul that is inhabiting a human body, a physical body, but let's not forget we also live in this particular dimension, and that physical body is subject to the atmosphere of this dimension. So if you are born into a sick earth, there is a likelihood that you will be born with certain disabilities that reflect the sickness of the environment that you are born into. Why? Because your mother is consuming the sick food, your mother is consuming the sick air, your mother is consuming the sick vibrations, and that will go to the fetus. So they're not saying that your disabilities are a punishment, or that your senses not being fully developed are a punishment of any kind, only a reflection of your physical atmosphere. But you still have the ability, because you have a second body, if you will. You have a soul that inhabits your body that also feeds upon the soul atmosphere that coincides with this atmosphere. Why? Because God, right? The divine wisdom, right? That created all things permeates throughout all things. So in order to connect to God, you simply connect to soul, and soul is feeding off that God essence, if you will, right? And so by doing that, by moving in love, in knowledge, in wisdom, in trying to grow yourself spiritually, you will ultimately increase your spiritual substance, which will, on the flip side, assist your physical body and help to heal your physical body as well. Now, this is not to say that if you wake up one day, this day, and decide to, become Mother Teresa, that all of a sudden now all your physical disabilities and all your physical problems just disappear. That's not how that works, because you're still subject to the same physical laws. You're still at war with the physical environment, right? So it's just like having a baby, right? When you have a baby, now it's like you're a parent to this child, but it's like you against the whole world, right? Because you have the TV that you now have to fight against, you have their teachers you have to fight against, you have government you have to fight, you have all this external stimuli that is trying to educate and indoctrinate your children, and you as a parent are like, oh my God, don't listen to this and don't talk to that and don't do that, because it's toxic and you know that it's not going to develop them right. It's the same process with regards to your soul and your body. It's like your soul is still going to elevate, your soul is still going to do everything it needs to do, and it's not going to be affected by the physical environment, but it will affect your physical body, but it's still doing so from a place of like, yeah, well, but you still have the sickness of the physical environment that you need to address. So I can't do the whole thing for you. You got to do it yourself. That kind of thing, right? Okay, so next footnote. It has to be remembered that this statement is not likely to convey the very opposite of the author's intention unless it is read in the light of his other intimations on love, wisdom, and will, but especially on wisdom and love. So, also, the essence of life is likely to escape in the life of thought alone, nor is thought itself of necessity the way of wisdom. Ooh, I'll comment on that in a second. There are many images therein from which we may cry to be delivered, and often cry vainly if we are once lost therein. This also is the world of multiplicity and not the world of union. It is right, however, to add that the harmonial philosophy of Davis sought no world of union, for this is the world of the mystic and not of the summerland. Okay, so here's where the divide occurs. But first, let me address that first sentence here. It says, right? The essence of life is likely to escape in life of thought alone, nor is thought itself of necessity the way of wisdom. So what they're saying here is it doesn't matter how much you think and contemplate and postulate and all that. At the end of the day, the amount of knowledge that you have obtained, the amount of scholarship that you have done, the amount of research that you have done does not equate to wisdom, right? Knowledge and philosophy and all the things that you are studying help you to physically intellectually better yourself, but where the wisdom comes in is if that knowledge is paired with love. Does that make sense? Right? So there's that, right? Then in the last part it says here that Davis, who is the author of this, his works talk about a summerland, talk about a heaven, talk about a place that spirits go to develop after they die, right? So Davis is still, and remember, in spiritualism they don't believe in reincarnation in spiritualism, and this is one of the founding Andrew Davis Jackson is one of the founding intellectuals of spiritualism, right? So he's still functioning from a very Christian ideology in the sense that there is this idea of an afterlife, a place that we go when we die, right? However, the author, the compiler of all of Davis's stuff here says in the footnotes that it's important for us to know that because many people take his works, myself included, take his works and sort of fit it into the narrative of being in divine union with God, which is a mystic perception, right? And I identify as a mystic, right? So for me, I take his information and I address it from that standpoint because to me, I believe in reincarnation. I believe in the ever progression of the soul. And there has to be a reason for that. And to me, the reason is not just to hang out in a summerland and just be blissful. To me, the reason is to be unified back with source, right? So that's just my own personal thing, but it also needs to be noted here because his works can be looked at in both ways. It definitely can. It definitely can. All right, and I think the last footnote is coming right now, and that says so it is said that the center of the soul, meaning its place of physical situation, is near the center of the brain. There is a small nucleus which is concentrated the vital power of all that constitutes a man. In the lifeless brain, this place is no larger than a buckshot. In the living brain, it is as large as a frost grape. From this center, it radiates over the whole body. All right. So this is yet another piece that talks in the early 1800s about how the brain is the seat of the soul. The brain is the seat, right? And we have a lot of scientific documentation that supports that today. Okay? As to the independence of these worlds, especially of soul from body, Davis dwells elsewhere on the fact that electricity is not created by the zinc and copper plates, but is simply developed and accumulated. And he argues that this is the case also with man's spiritual principle. The brain is indispensable to the individualization of the living elements of life into a healthy and harmonious mind, but not to the prior existence of those elements, nor to the continuation of the individual mind after the physical structure has subserved its purpose. Okay? So, yeah. So, this idea of electricity, electromagnetism, okay? The idea of electromagnetism in a physical place, right, requires certain elements, okay? And what Davis is saying here is that those elements also exist here in the body. And so therefore your electromagnetic current does play a role in, the seat of the soul in the brain. So again, early 1800s, talking about the nervous system. As we've learned later on in the early 21st century, the nervous system and the spinal cord and the cerebral fluids are a huge, huge part of our spiritual higher self. So all of this is still very accurate to this day. Very accurate. All right, go me. I ended on time. So now we open up the floor to questions. It is 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We open the floor to questions, and just know that next time we meet up, the chapter that we are going to be discussing is chapter 7, and it is the soul of man. Ooh. All right. So let's open this to questions. Does anyone have any questions about what let me know. Hi, Selma. Hello, hello. Hi, Joy. Love you too. Let's see what's going on TikTok. Hello. Hello. Lots of people joined. Nice. Thank you so much. Love it. Don't be shy. Ask your questions. Don't be shy. Oh, let me check Instagram. My bad. For real, Instagram? Oh, for real? Instagram cut my live. Like, what the F, bro? Wild. Okay. All right, beautiful. So if there are no questions, or if you can't think of any now, but then you think about it later, totally fine. Just leave a comment right here. I will be more than happy to pull it back up and answer your question at some later date or make a short video out of it if you want. No biggie. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will see you guys next Tuesday. Thank you for watching. This is how we grow, you guys. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.